Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men, shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where our intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models. So the intention here is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing amazing things in the world. And I've got a brother on today who is doing just that. His name is Curtis Valentine. And he and I were on a panel last week, a Black male youth empowerment panel. And I said, man, that's a guy that I've got to get on this show because he's one of the reasons why I started the show in the first place, because I want to highlight brothers like him who are doing amazing things. So without further ado, let's welcome Curtis to the show. Curtis, how you doing today, man?
I'm blessed, man. Glad to reconnect with brothers like you. The amazing panel before, when I first met with you. But, someone told me once, recently, after having met, some brothers like us at a panel, he says, man, I think I found my tribe. And it's a sense of a lot of us sort of work in our own spaces, but it's always good to connect with brothers who are like-minded.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about Real Men Teach, which is your organization. But before we do, I want to start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about growing up. Give us the Cliff Note version of growing up for you. What was that like?
Well, I'm born and raised in New Jersey, central New Jersey. So not so much near New York or Philadelphia. And so central Jersey has its own world. New Jersey has a lot of small towns. And so there are 500 school districts in the state of New Jersey. Wow. Because every high school is like its own district. And so if you're born into my town, I'm going to see you at graduation because it was such an insular spot. And so that really shaped me because, my Little League coaches, my barber, they were, my minister, they were all fathers of friends of mine. And so it is as sort of close to a lot of these stories of these towns in the South where everyone knew each other. You knew your pastor. You know where your pastor lived. You knew where your teacher lived. You saw your teacher in the grocery store. And so I grew up, in a place, latchkey kid, came home, my sister and I walked home from school, played in the street, doors, when my parents were home, our doors were never locked. That type of community where the whole block sort of took care of everybody's kid. And so, grew up in a very, very nurturing environment with men like my father, but also this community, this village. It was very much a village vibe. And that really motivated me to do this work because I just wish everybody had the same upbringing as I did. Public school student, these are my parents, went to college, very high standards from my parents, but also from men in my community who did go to college. And so I was hearing Hampton University, Howard University, Morehouse College, when I was a little kid, even though my parents weren't college educated. I remember my Sunday school teacher came in one day. I was 9, 10 years old, maybe. He says, Curtis, you remind me of a Morehouse man. And I said, what's that? And so lo and behold, 12 years later, I graduated from Morehouse College, but it's those dreams of people tapping you on the shoulder saying you can be better. It's really how I got here.
Nice. So name a woman other than your mother who's inspired you to be the man that you are?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I would say my sister, my
Okay.
big sister, but she's only a year older than me. And so she, she's kind of an old soul. So when I came home from the hospital, even though I'm only like a year and 8 months older than her, she was calling me my baby, my baby. She took care of me, and she was the one, talented and gifted, very, very confident. And so I looked at her. As I grew up right behind her. And when she ran for Student Government Association president, I ran for the treasurer. And then when she graduated, moved on, I became the president. And when she was in high school, she sort of ushered me through a lot of life and sort of paved the way for me to feel confident in this work. And then, I remember when I was, she's a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer, and I was looking to take classes for the LSAT, and I had to take a class. It was $1,000 for the training. She's in law school at the time, but she throws me $1,000 for the LSAT class. She didn't have to do that, but she's a sister. And so even to this day, she is inspiration for me, even to trademark Real Men Teach. She saw me using it. She says, Curtis, it's important you own your work. And so she's in this space around entrepreneurship. She lives in the New York area and works with a lot of African Americans in Harlem, and really trying to bring back that community. But I would say my sister, she's amazing woman and someone who inspires me every day.
Nice. Now, with that being said, I noticed on your Real Men Teach clothing, I don't see the registered trademark sign. Do you not have that symbol?
I don't have it on my apparel, no. But I do, if you see me, like a lot of the posts when I first launched it, I framed the trademark, and even going through the process of trademarking it is something that I really took to heart. I come from a family of inventors, and so I have family who work, who really work to trademark and make sure they have ownership in their work. When I first started using Real Men Teach, I reached out to an attorney to trademark it, and he said, well, Curtis, someone already owns it. At the time, it actually was Winston-Salem State University, a great HBCU in North Carolina. But then, eventually they stopped using it. It lapsed. I was able to apply for it, and then here I am today. But yeah, as moving forward, you will see in other documents and things like that you will see, Real Men Teaches the registered trademark of Curtis Valentine. You'll see it on my Twitter handle, my Facebook, and a lot of our information on our website.
Yeah, put that R circle on there for protection there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, name a book that you love and tell me why you love it.
Well, I think a book that I've read recently is the education of Black Americans. I think the date is 1863. And it's a book I recently read, but it talks about African American education long before a lot of us sort of thought about education prior to HBCU. So a lot of people come into education of African Americans as emancipation, and then HBCUs are founded. But there were schools being founded even during enslavement in the North and in the South. And I learned about, it's funny, it's about book. I have a book right here next to me. I didn't know you would ask me this question, but I had it right here. Is the book about book by the name of John Chavis. My full name is Curtis Chavis Valentine. John Chavis is an ancestor of mine, but John Chavis started a school not far from here where I am in Southern Virginia right now, but in Northern North Carolina. And this is in early 1800s. Black man starting a school that actually enrolled Black and white students. And so this story of sort of African American education going back to the early 1800s is a book I read, and that really, really sort of set the groundwork for where we are now, and looking at the work we're doing as a continuum of the work that started generations ago.
Mm. Now, are you a movie buff?
I am.
Name one of your favorite movies.
So my favorite movie, I'd say my number one, it's actually Back to the Future.
Okay.
I'm a kind of, I told you how I'm a big history buff, and the idea that someone could go back in time and sort of walk with the ancestors is something that I always, wanted to do. I was a big fan of, a big student of the civil rights movement. I said, well, what if I could march with King, or, go back and work with Harriet Tubman and get people free. Like I would dream about these things. And you watch a movie about a guy who actually did it, the time machine, and he's doing all this amazing things. Then he's meeting his parents. I'm like, what would be cool to meet my parents? Like, me and my dad were like cool. Like me and my dad, would we be cool in high school? Like, I mean, if I met him, and sometimes I joke with my kids all the time. I said, well, what if time machines exist? Like, what if you came back from the future and met yourself in school? Would you know it? And they're like, Dad, you're tripping me out. And like you never know. But I'm a big Back to the Future fan because I understand that, there's so much about history that I value. But at the same time, people say, well, Curtis, we can't romanticize about the past so much. There's so much to do right now that, there's more than enough work to do here in the present. And this is your time to get to work.
Yeah. This is an all around great movie though. I love
oh my gosh.
I love
One, two, yeah.
I love that movie also. I'm a big movie buff. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, as you can see.
I see you.
I'm a Star Wars fan, but yeah, it's a great movie. Now, if I gave you a magic wand and you could create anything your heart desired, what would your life look like 10 years from now?
Well, interesting. If I could create anything, well, I mean, I would say this. I mean, whatever I would create, it would be for my children. And so even this Real Men TT organization, this is something that I hope to be a legacy. There's something, a wand I'd like to wave, not far from where I'm sitting right now. I mentioned I'm actually about 3 hours south of where I live in the DC area at a home in my ancestral home of Southern Virginia. And it's a school that my great grandparents helped co-found not far from here. The school is over 95 years old. And my goal is to repossess that school, update it, rehab it, and turn it into an African-American museum for education. And so, if I could raise a wand, I would, make sure that school is rehabbed and that we turn it into a museum, that the Real Men Teach movement, goes on to, project onto the world all these positive images with Netflix specials and coffee table books and apparel and, sponsorships and branding throughout this country, so that it is so, apparent to folks that, there is no debate about where we stand in our community with the men. With men who stand guard every day. And so if I could raise my wand, I would continue this work, but, expand it throughout the hemisphere through television, through books, and through edifices like schools around the country that show the history of education of African Americans.
Nice. So you need to just speak that into existence, my man. Speak that into existence.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know folks, there's a school of thought that, Curtis, man, just be quiet, don't put stuff out there, and then just throw it on them. I said, that's not really, the spirit I move in. I move in a space, to your point. I declare it. I share it with folks. I say, hey, man, hey, Michael Taylor, man, I want to do this. You say, well, Curtis, you know what? I know someone who can help you, or I love to help that. Now, there's a school of thought of brothers saying, don't tell Michael anything until it's ready, until it's perfect. Mm-hmm. But then in doing that, I'm not giving Michael the opportunity to bless it. I'm not giving Mike the opportunity to help me. Because there's so many ideas that have sort of not been successful, but it's because you probably had someone within arm's length who probably could have helped you, and you didn't even give them the opportunity because you were too busy worrying about your pride, or whether if it didn't work out the way I wanted, and maybe you'll judge me because, I'm Mike Taylor, I'd never lose. Like, we got to get out of that idea, because that's keeping brothers from working together and building, because that's how we got here. We got together, building.
Yes. Now, last question. So there are some people who are actually pretty pessimistic about the future. And then there are others who are pretty optimistic about the future. So where do you fall on that spectrum between optimism and pessimism for the future in general? Where do you fall?
Mm-hmm. Well, I was reading something earlier that said, work like it depends on you and pray like it depends on God. And so I'm a work. I mean, so like my future is what I make it. And so the only way I'd be pessimistic if I doubted myself. you got to bet on yourself. Like I know who I am. I know what I'm made of, but I also know that I'm not afraid to ask for help. And, you know, if I fail with my whole team behind me, you know, me and you, Mike, we just met a couple weeks ago. We already connected. I'm sure this is the first of many conversations. I see the brothers behind you, you know, in your group. If I fail with thousands of men behind me and beside me, that's not failure. I don't know what you call it. You got to call it something else. You know, we tried and it didn't work that way, and so we keep trying. But I'm optimistic because of who I am and, you know, my history, but also my ability to ask for help and to take it and to be constructive and constructive in that, okay, this didn't work, try something else. But also to hold myself accountable as well when I'm not doing my best. And then ask for help for those who can help me when I'm not doing my best.
Great attitude. Great attitude. So now I want to give you an opportunity to introduce Real Men Teach. Tell the audience about the organization, why you started it, and what it does.
In a sentence, the mission of Real Men Teach is to recruit and retain male educators of color through a reimaging and reinvesting in the profession. And so this idea of reimaging kind of goes back to all of our views of what it means to be a male educator. And so oftentimes you'll see these questions on social media that say, you know, tell me how many male teachers you had, black male teachers you had growing up. Sometimes it's 0, 1, and you have these long debates. And it's sort of like, it comes from a very, you know, from a deficit perspective. All right, I didn't have a lot of male educators. And so we kind of go into these diatribes about that. I'm a little bit more concerned about, of the educators you did have, did any of them inspire in you the idea of wanting to be an educator yourself? Like, were there men, particularly male educators, if I'm talking to young men, male educators of color, if I'm talking to male educators of men of color, was there someone, even the 1 or 2 you did have, inspire you to want to become an educator? And some will say, you know, I had a male educator, but the way he carried himself, the way he communicated with us was not inspirational at all. It seemed like he was tucking everything in of who he really was, and I don't want that. And so when I think about Real Men Teach, our mission is to say, you know what, we're going to reframe what it means to be a male educator and allow men to be their full selves back to the young people, to say, you know what, you can be an educator and still like comic books, wear Jordans, play in a go-go band, ride a motorcycle, be in a fraternity, all the different pieces of what it means to be a man of color. We want to put those back into the world, saying we will define what it means to be a male educator of color. And so through this, you know, through our apparel, we're raising scholarship money so that no man is, you know, removed from a classroom because he can't afford to stay in school or to pay for an examination, like a practice exam or anything like that. And so this, you know, the vision, you know, raising that wand again, is to raise $10 million in scholarships for male educators of color. And so I say, I want to be the UNCF of male educators. I want to have so much money that we will make sure that that's not an obstacle to men staying in the classroom. So it's a scholarship piece, but also this marketing piece. And right now we're going through our Real Men Teach 100 campaign, where over 100 days, we're highlighting 100 men who are all wearing the apparel, taking their photos, but we're also telling their story, even in the photograph, what their name is, where they went to school, what their profession is. You know, are they a father? Are they a mentor? Are they a musician? Are they an educator? And many of them are not educators at all. They are people saying, I'm not an educator, but I'm investing in an educator by buying this sweatshirt and donating to the campaign. And so I stand with male educators because I'm here because of them, but it's an opportunity for everybody to highlight what it means to be a man in 2021 and what it means to be a male educator.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to getting mine. I've already ordered it. I'm waiting for it to come in so I can put it out there and promote your movement, man. I think it's awesome. Now, I want to ask you this question, which is pretty obvious. You've kind of answered it, but I want you to speak directly to this. Why do you think it's important to have Black male educators?
If you can't see it, you can't be it. and that's it. There's not rocket science. And the data is clear, but the impact of Black male educators on all students, not just Black students, on all students. And so there's, for those who would say, Kurt, it's not as important. They don't debate the data. Maybe they debate the fact that there are other racial groups or genders that can fill in that gap. And I'm saying you don't have to do that, because there are men who I believe would be amazing educators, but there's something blocking that. And it's sort of, I think it's almost like some of it's superficial, some of it's artificial. Some of it's the idea that, I wouldn't be a good educator. Where did that come from? Or, I would love to teach, but I want to teach my way. Okay, how do we do that? You all want educators, but you don't want me. You don't want all of me. You don't want Curtis Valentine. You want a Black male educator, which I think a lot of men feel as well. How do we create an environment within schools and within communities for men to be their authentic self? Because that's when, one thing about young people, they can sense authenticity a mile away, and they can sense fakeness. If I bring my 10-year-old daughter in this room, my 12-year-old son, they could tell, and because they still have that purity of heart. And so students can tell when a teacher enjoys a subject, or when a teacher is on fire for a topic. It is different, but it's that one time a month when a teacher may have done all the curriculum and all of a sudden says, you know what, today we're going to learn about, physics, but using skateboards. And then the student's like, Mr. Johnson, wow, man, do you skateboard? Oh my God, I grew up skateboarding. I do half pipes on the weekend, I skate. Wow, Mr. Johnson, I didn't know you skateboarded. Yeah, and he's teaching lessons on physics, and all of a sudden, the students are coming alive because he's coming alive. How do we make sure that that's not 10% of the time, it's 90%, because that's when students engage more into this work. And so, you can see how passionate I am, because I found that thing for me. Like when someone's found that thing, it is contagious. You're like, oh my God, this guy, that may not be mine, but I want to find whatever he found or she found, and whatever that unique thing is for them. Please, God, please give it to me, because that'll keep me up late, wake me up early in the morning, and I will live the rest of my life knowing that I found my purpose.
Yeah. Now, there's a recent story that went kind of viral of the principal cutting his students' hair. Did you see that story?
I did see that.
Now, in answer to that question, why do we need Black male educators? I think that story really kind of sums it up. Mm-hmm. Because for those of you who did not see the story, there's a principal, and he had a kid that was in his school, and the teacher sent the student to the principal because the student wouldn't take his cap off. Well, what happened was the kid had got a haircut, and he was a little ashamed of the haircut, so he didn't want to take the cap off. Well, it turns out the principal was great at cutting hair. So the principal goes home, gets his clippers. Well, first of all, the principal talks to the kid to explain why he wouldn't take his hat off. Okay, first of all. So he takes his hat off. He tells the principal what's going on. The principal says, look, I'm great with some clippers. You want me to hook you up? And the kid says, yeah, if you hook up my hair, I'll take my hat off. The principal goes home, gets his clippers, comes back, trims his hair. Kid's happy, goes back to class. Now, on the surface, it looks sort of like a simple story, but that story in itself speaks volumes to the importance of Black male educators. Because a couple of things. First of all, he had the awareness to recognize the kid wasn't a bad kid. The kid was just a little ashamed of his haircut. But see, if he would have just saw that kid as someone that was rebelling and, just going against his teachers and just being a bad kid, he could have changed the trajectory of that child's life by simply sending him home or expelling him for not taking his hat off. So I think that story is really a microcosm of the need for compassionate, sensitive Black male educators that relate, okay? Just that can relate to the students in a way. And I'm not saying white people couldn't relate the same. No, I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is that brother had the awareness, the compassion, and the sensitivity to go a little deeper with that kid.
Well, Michael, I'm going to say in many ways they couldn't. And I don't think that's criminal to say, in part because there's only Black men and Black women know the power of a haircut to a Black man.
Okay, I get you.
This, because we all have I got white friends. We got white friends. When white friends get haircuts, oftentimes, I don't know if even in their community they can tell when they got one, unless it's like one of those dramatic cuts. For us, man, again, we take the long way home. We go on places we don't even need to be because of the pride we have. And I mean, there may be some story about that goes back a long ways away, but similar with Black women here. And there's conversations now about women like, Michelle Obama and others sort of got into certain spaces with white women and having to explain these things. Now we're talking about women who are in their 40s and 50s. Like you live 40 years, 50 years in America, and you're still just understanding what Black women in their hair. And there have been documentaries, and Chris Rock did a documentary. There have been books about it. And so these things matter. And I imagine there are probably students who've been suspended, who've been, a bunch of other things because of issues that I think a lot of us would have been able to sort of fish out really quickly. Or it doesn't have to be about hair. It could be just something happening in the community where, this young man lives in this part of town. Last night, something happened in this part of town. You don't know that because you don't live in this part of town. But as an educator, I understand, or any staff member, they could be the custodian, it could be the lunch lady. Someone say, hey, they see a little boy walking down the hallway and says, hey, Miss Johnson, let me hit you real quick. That was Timmy. You didn't know his uncle, had an issue over the weekend. Yeah, I know his family. I just want to let you know if he's feeling some we might not tell you that, but he's going through something. But you got to be in the community to know that, or you have to have certain cultural. And the last thing I think the story kind of tells me is, so this principal was a barber all along, but how many people knew that? I'm not saying he got to come in and start clipping everybody up, but I think for him at the beginning of the school year to kind of even let people know, if you have students who you think are in this space, I do this. And so before it kind of gets even crazy, just know, Mr. Johnson cuts hair. Miss Smith is maybe a seamstress. So if a kid comes in with his shirt sort of torn up and he won't tuck his shirt in because he got a hole in it, Miss Johnson down the road, she's a seamstress. She makes dresses. So-and-so over here. For some reason, we police ourselves and we bring into schools, into settings, a caricature of what you think is acceptable to other people. And you put everything else away. You know what? I don't think you all would respect my cowboy boots. So I'm not going to wear them. Or, what? I would love to wear my hair this way, but in this space, I don't think. And so what happens is we also don't give people the opportunity to learn and to explain and to grow. And we just keep inheriting this historical disconnect between cultures that in some ways leaves kids, suspended in a bad space, disruptive, all the words you want to call it. But in the end, it's just, if we could connect with one another, it'd be really, really powerful.
Yeah. And again, I think that's a piece that has been left out of education across the board, which is compassion and sensitivity. I think now more than ever, we need to have that in our school system, especially in our educators, to be able to look a little deeper than the behavior of that child and try to get to what's driving that negative behavior. So that's something. So I want to ask you this. There is I don't want to call it a stereotype, but I'll share this story. When my son was in high school, they took their football picture, all the football players together taking the picture. And in the picture, and there's probably 60% Black, 20% Hispanic, 10% white, maybe in terms of racial makeup. But everyone on the picture had this really serious look on their face. Now, my son, similar to me, smiles a lot, right? But when he took this picture, he had this tough kind of macho kind of thing going on. And I asked, I said, Charles, why you got that mean look on your face? And he says, Dad, I don't look like a punk. I said, okay. So I want you to think about that story. As an educator, how important, this is something that I hear very few people talking about. How important is it for our young men to see brothers smiling and joyful and happy, especially as educators?
Well, I mean, I think the stereotype you mentioned, particularly as it relates to, the grill, I think you can extrapolate that across other, I would say more serious stereotypes, which is around reading, around raising your hand in class, around volunteering, around things that you think your peers would question just in the moment. And so you just say, you know what, I'm not going to step out. I'm again, even though I have an interest in it, I don't want anybody else to know. And so let me just tuck that in. Or, if everybody's grilling, I don't know, if you go to a bar right now, you see 10 guys in a picture, some fraternity brothers, some college friends come together, some old army buddies, and everybody's grilling, and either one guy's smiling, the person taking a picture is going to say, Michael, what you smiling so big for? Everybody else is grilling, right? And so it's this idea of like kind of go along and get, you messing the whole picture up, man. We all, and then somebody was like, hey, are we smiling or are we grilling? Like somebody will say that, yeah, what we doing? Like what we doing? Like so we know at least we look, uniform. But I think your point is well taken about smiling. I think there's this movement around, Black men smile because there's this sense of, hardness. But again, where does that? I don't think that doesn't come from us. I think that caricature is one that I think was placed on us that we're insensitive, we're disconnected, we're harsh, and then in the class and in schools, when they started recruiting male teachers, I think they looked for that. We want the big Black teacher to be the disciplinarian, and they sent all the kids down to their hallway. But I think back about my father. My father was a Marine, tough guy, but he was not afraid to cry. He cried in front of me. And if you ask my two children, Daddy cries, and Daddy gets sensitive, and Daddy cries over things that are important. But they understand that it's nothing wrong with being I'm 6'2", 210 pounds, but I also have sensitivities and I have feelings. And sometimes we'll have conversations and we'll say stuff, and I said, well, you hurt my feelings. Did you mean to hurt my feelings? And they'll say, no, Dad, I didn't mean to hurt your feelings. And vice versa. They'll tell me, Dad, I think you hurt my feelings. And I apologize. We have to be models. Male educators need to do that as well in their space. And, because students keep it 100. Some students want to hurt a teacher's feelings just to see the response. I would challenge teachers, say, hey, Mr. Jackson, were you trying to hurt my feelings? And see what he says. He's like, well, Jackson, I was trying to hurt your feelings. Like, why would you want to do that? Do you like getting your feelings hurt or getting embarrassed in front of other people? And I think when you start these conversations and you sort of put it back on young people, I think that would, that would be a lesson in and of itself to understand, even though I'm here, I'm this male educator, and you have this persona of what I am and what I represent. I too have feelings, and I understand you have feelings, because there's this idea that even kids don't have, teenage boys, particularly teenage boys of color, don't have feelings, because there's making babies, and they're playing sports and they never cry, but Mike, my biggest fear, or one of my biggest fears, is these caricatures are carried out in public policy, in policing, in them saying, I have a suspect, he's a Black male, 6'2". Oh, we got to bring everybody in because this guy is going to be unruly and hard to manage. Where does that come from? Oh, he's going to be insensitive, and he's going to be someone who is going to try to hurt. Where does that come from? What percentage of Black men in a space where they've been asked to do something are not complying? It is probably in the point whatevers, but they're able to extrapolate that and to get away with stuff because society says, yeah, you're right. have you seen how big Michael is? You know, black men, you know how they don't smile. They don't have feelings. These police officers have feelings. We see them smiling all the time. These things have an impact, Mike, and that's my biggest fear. That it's not just sort of conversations around, football pitches. Now we're talking about life and death here, and grand juries, and whether juries think that this young black boy, this Tamir Rice, this Michael Brown, because there's pictures of him not smiling, maybe, and they pull him up in the news, so all pictures of him grilling, that all of a sudden he deserved what he got. There's stories right now around the whole Floyd hearing, around people are saying, Fox News is talking about how Floyd didn't die because his guy had his neck on his knee on his neck for 7 minutes. He died of a drug overdose. Or he was 6'7". What do you expect him to do? I got pictures of him. He ain't smiling none of these pictures. He can't have a soul and feelings. What in the world going on? Where did you get that from? Who told you that? So yeah, man, smiling and educators modeling and then giving others permission, and to say, hey, let's take a picture. Let's all smile. I'm going to smile too. You'd be surprised, because the students, they would smile if no other reason. They're laughing at the teacher because he's smiling. Hey, you have a beautiful, you got a nice smile, man. That's how we start. We model, and then students will follow.
Yeah, and so this show is based on a book that I wrote called Shattering Black Male Stereotypes. And so the third, I wrote in the book what I call the 10 most destructive media-generated illusions about Black men. Okay, that was the subtitle. Well, one of the illusions, one of the stereotypes is that Black men are all angry and violent. See, that's been the narrative that they've been putting out there from day one. And so I'm a solutions guy. I'm trying to figure out, how do we find solutions? And you really hit the nail on the head. As Black men, we must get comfortable expressing our emotions. We must make it okay for us, especially as men. And again, I've been writing about the changing roles of masculinity for 25 years. And so as an optimist, I see some positive changes. But what's been missing, I thought, was, number one, people that look like us having the same conversation. And that's why I started writing. But as an educator, I think it's imperative that educators have the emotional awareness to be able to recognize that, number one, a lot of these kids that are coming from these traumatic environments, they're acting out because of the trauma that they're dealing with at home. And, I think personally, our educational system definitely needs some restructuring, if you will. But I'm curious, as an educator, are there any, shall I say, curriculum, or are you guys having the conversation within the education in the school system about emotional health and mental health?
Well, particularly in where I am on the school board, and where reimagines started with my school district in Prince George's County, Maryland. During the pandemic, we started sort of wellness check-ins, and this is just amongst men having conversations about, how are things going, and we called them no agenda. Like, there's no agenda. Like, what's on your mind? And I would start the questions off with, what are you most proud of? Anything small. And what are you working on? Like, what are you working on? It could be job-wise or just personally. Like, I'm really working on trying to get better at this. And then we just, wherever it took us. And it was a safe space. Confidentiality obviously is important. But we have to move and begin having those conversations with students. We were having them as an educator. I think you have to have that space for educators to have, because, we're the ones who are always pouring into others. But in the end, eventually your cup gets empty. And the question is always, like, how are you refilling your cup? And for the most part, you refill it, with your brothers. But there are a lot of spaces where, like, you may have one or two educators in the whole male educators of color in the building, or in some of these, predominantly white school districts in the whole district. And that's why a lot of these guys are reaching out and joining the Real Men Teach movement for some reason, because they're saying, Curtis, you live in Houston or you live in DC or, Atlanta or New York or, Newark, New Jersey or something. Okay, you're going to see people of color. But I'm in Southern Illinois. I'm in, Western Iowa. I'm in like Eastern Ohio, and it's just me out here, bro. And I'm trying to find my tribe because I'm out here. I need someone to talk to because either, I'm going to break, meaning I'm going to leave the profession because I can't, I'm empty. And so we have to refill our this cup. As far as curriculum and really getting to the bottom of this, I think there are, schools that have created sort of these male mentoring groups, I think, that allow for young men to come together and have these conversations. It's harder to have around other groups of people because again, it's you want a safe space. But again, you want educators to model. But even before that, you have to have educators who are in building with school leaders. And this is sort of another conversation where our school leaders creating the enabling environment for classroom educators, male educators of color, to be honest, be their full selves, because sometimes they'll say, I would love to be able to do this, but I don't think the environment I'm in is welcoming to that. And so it's an ecosystem around this. There's policies in some way. There's there's school leadership, and there's parents. Some parents are like, I don't want you talking to my child about that, or and so this is why I think the Real Men Teach movement is so important, because we're not specifically educators. We are lawyers, doctors, bus drivers, barbers, and we're all on the same page, but we're all standing together saying we need male educators of color. And not only we need them, I'm here to support them in the community, at home, and wherever it is, because we want to reinforce a lot of the values they're learning in school once they leave school. The average student is only going to spend about 30% of their time in a school building with an educator in front of them. The other 70% of the time, they're in the community. What is your barber telling you when you get in the chair? What is your bus driver saying when you get on a bus? What's your football coach saying on the football field? What's your pastor saying in church? What's your dad saying at home? If your teacher is saying, it's okay to be sensitive, it's okay to cry, it's okay to smile, but the other 5 men I just mentioned is saying, men don't do that, you in a bad space. So you need a village approach to this work.
Yeah, and that's why I've created this platform to give men, especially Black men, a place to come to. I like to use the term "get real." And when I say "get real," I'm not talking about the "get real" that you see on television. I'm talking about getting real with what's in here. What's the challenges that we're dealing with? What's the fears that we have? What's the sadness that we may be carrying? Those are the things. When I talk about getting real, that's where true transformation comes from. When men get together and get into a space where they can drop the mask, stop pretending, get honest, get real with what's going on inside. And I love the term you used. Be their fullest selves. That's the key. Creating that space where they can be authentic with who they are. Now, I read, I think somewhere on your site that DC has the highest concentration of Black male teachers. So
Well, no, actually, Prince George's County, where I started, has the highest concentration.
Okay.
But we're in the DC metro area, but we have the highest in the DC metro area, which includes DC, Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Fairfax, sort of the districts surrounding the DC. So we have the highest percentage in Prince George's County.
So do you think, and obviously you kind of answer this question with the organization that you put together, that more Black men are moving into this role more so?
Well, I was on a panel yesterday, and I'm hearing that it's actually moving in the opposite direction, that it's actually going down.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a number of reasons why. Some would say pay, some would say just respect for the position, some would say recognition. But I think the framing of the teaching profession, particularly during COVID, has not always been the most positive. And the sort of the idea that the significance of teachers, especially with an online, a lot of technology, that there's not nearly as much, importance in this work. But I'll say what I said, on this panel, there is teaching happening 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so whether you teach your daughter how to ride a bike, teach your son how to tie his shoes, teach your daughter how to bake a cake, all these things, I mean, there's teaching happening. You have a skill and you share it. Now, I don't know if you ever baked a cake before. It takes patience. It takes instruction. It takes model. Everything you need to teach someone how to, math, reading, science is happening. Now, clearly when you're teaching, it's happening over a longer period of time. You're getting more in depth. But the sooner we can dispel this misconception that only certain type of people teach, that, either you're a born teacher or you're not, or you have to teach in the way that you learned with the educator who taught you 20 years ago, because we really haven't changed the idea of what it means to be an educator, then no, you're not going to get people into the profession, especially when, they feel like, first of all, the money is it's okay, but not enough to deal with all the negativity that comes with it. I'm saying, I challenge that. I'm saying, let's put our teachers back on the pedestal where they were during the civil rights movement, back when it was lawyers, doctors, and teachers, and preachers. Those are the top four. And, those people got the big piece of chicken when it came to church dinner, right? Those were the four groups. I'm saying through Real Men Teaching, through our marketing, we're going to elevate these folks to say, you know what, when you become a school teacher, when you get into that classroom, bruh, it's going to be a parade. And wherever you go, if you're wearing this Real Men Teach hoodie, they're going to stop you and say, bruh, hey, are you an educator? Either you'll say, yes, I'm an educator, or no, I support the movement to put more men in education. It's going to be that connection you're going to have, that handshake, that head nod is going to be the greatest feeling you're going to have in that day, because you are saying that we cannot move forward as a community. We can't move forward as a people unless we have our best on the field. And there's so many people I think would be amazing educators who, for one reason or another, a lot of it is, again, perception, some of this is support, some of it's a lot of these things that have kept them out. I think we can address that. I think it's not as hard as it looks.
So what are some of the concrete things that you do to get more men involved in possibly becoming teachers? Now, you mentioned scholarships, to help, but are you doing workshops, seminars, flyers? What are you doing to attract men?
It's just a good question. Through this work, and I've been doing this work for a while now, there are amazing men and organizations who are also doing this work. And what I said when I started Real Men Teaches, one, I'm not going to duplicate work. And I'm not going to try to do something better than someone I know does it really well already. And so we're partnering with groups who do the trainings, who do the recruitment, and we're going to be the marketing arm and the communication arm for those organizations. And so we've been approached by groups that recruit men to become tutors. And so these are educators who are looking for additional resources and want to tutor. And they're saying, Kurt, I have a tutoring company, but I have 0 male educators of color who are tutors. Or, I have a program that trains teachers to teach math and science, but I don't have male educators to do that. And so can you help us recruit? Can you help us come up with a marketing campaign to attract people to even apply, to get involved in a pipeline? There are amazing groups, and you're hearing every day, someone starting this pipeline center or trying to recruit college students. And my fear is that if we are recruiting young people into a profession that we know currently does not embrace us being our full selves, then I think we're not going to meet the mark that we're trying to make. This is going to sound a little extreme, but Dr. King, right before he died, he said, I fear we're integrating ourselves into a burning house, and that America is burning. And so we're trying to kind of become, accepted by these folks. But in the end, it's bigger than this. When it comes to education and school systems, I think it's bigger than just trying to get more Black men into the school building. Because you're just kind of bringing them in, by the truckloads, but they get in, it's the same environment that you and I have been talking about for the last 45 minutes. They're not going to be very successful. And so I'm saying, I want to partner with you in sort of reframing this so they can, to them and to their school leaders, to say, school leaders, if he comes in with a Real Men Teach hoodie on, don't tell him he's out of, he's not in dress code. Especially he's going to come in and give you the banging physics lesson, the great history lesson. He's going to come in, let him be his full self. On the other end, there are other obstacles of keeping people in the classroom, and that's the finances. And so this fundraising and this scholarship is going to keep brothers in. Now, the brothers who are doing the workshops and, those things, are going to be wherever we partner. Will we have conversations about education? Absolutely. The goal is to do a book tour. So we'll go city to city and bring together rooms full of men, bring together ideas, have conversations around, best practices, film that, document it, put it back out, do focus groups. And so we'll do that. But I don't want to sort of get out of place in our role and our contribution, because there are brothers who do it way better and are as passionate about that as I am about this.
Yeah. Now, one of the fastest growing industries, if you will, is coaching. Everybody's a coach these days. You've got people from all walks of life. And actually, I see it as a very positive thing because you now have access to some very talented people that can coach you in a lot of different areas of your life. I wear what I'll call the transformational coach. That's what I call myself a transformational coach, because it is my belief that, as the good book says, be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Mm-hmm. And that's what my books do. That's what this program does. That's what my speeches and stuff are about. It's about transformation. So from a coaching perspective, which when I think about teachers, and I think you kind of touched upon this, one of the reasons why maybe men aren't so interested in teaching is, number one, it's been a female-dominated industry for a very, very long time. But number two, I think it sort of lacks swag. you know what I mean? And I know the importance of teachers, but brothers, not just brothers, but us guys, we want to get a little swag. We want to have, the titles and so to me, a coach from a intellectual perspective sounds cooler than a teacher. Right? So if we reframe, and again, we're obviously going to have teachers in the school systems, but this Real Men Teach thing, which I love, it's also Real Men Coach, because that's what I do. I'm teaching, but instead of teaching and calling it teaching, I'm calling it coaching, because men are more likely to invest, if you will, in a coaching program versus a teaching program, even if they're the same thing. So is it possible to sort of use that moniker, if you will, as you're recruiting, use that kind of as you're getting these men engaged and educating, because that's what we're doing. Would coaching, using that term, somehow help with the marketing? Does that make sense?
Well, we use, if anyone were to go to my Instagram page, official Real Men Teach, or our Twitter page, and you see some of our posts, on my LinkedIn, you'll see us sort of like we highlight a photograph of a man, and you see that, but then also you'll see some writing because he has answered some questions, and one of the questions is, why do you teach? If anyone is really paying attention, you'll see that I put teach in quotation marks, because I understand that teach means different things to different people. If someone said, hey man, like who taught you how to ride a bike? We use the word taught, teach. But if you have a father who taught his son how to ride a bicycle, are you a teacher? You're like, well, no, I coached my son into riding, or I mentored him. I mean, there's certain words you can use to describe the action it took for you to convey to someone else how to do something they couldn't do before. And that's with sports. That's with, and so is a football coach a teacher? Absolutely. He is teaching you how to throw a football, a spiral, but we use the word coach to describe athletes, on the field. But when you go to the classroom, all of a sudden you're teaching. But I think, what's behind what you're saying is, Kurt, the word the word teach is really hang people up. And, I wouldn't disagree with that because, again, it has been shaped by, again, a certain narrative around what a teacher does, what a teacher looks like. And so what you'll see in our, and again, if you read some of the comments of some of the men we highlighted, it says, we highlight men from all walks of life because we understand that all men can teach. And again, this idea of teach is coach, mentor, support, parent. Like to us, like to father, the verb father encompasses all that stuff. Like when you teach your child how to brush their teeth, like, are you a teacher? Are you coaching? No, I'm fathering. Like that's a verb. I am fathering. Whatever that means. Your son now can take the trash out and it's all encompassing. And so I think what I would the idea of what you call yourself, whether a coach or a teacher, I would leave that up to that individual. But I would say, because the word teaching is not going anywhere, I would say, how can real men teach? How can Curtis Valentine reframe what that word teach means? Because it's such a powerful word and so ubiquitous. At the same time, I'll just say, parenthetically, if you go to the schools that I've been working with in Indianapolis, called the Purdue Polytechnic High School, where students are kind of learning, getting college credit, but also in high school, their teachers are called coaches. So they don't use the word teacher. They're coaches because the students have individualized learning programs where they actually pick their classes similar to college. And so at the beginning of the year, they pick classes they want to take. And then a lot of it's online. And so they're able to pretty much do their own schedule. But they have adults who coach them in choosing their classes, kind of tutoring them. And so the coach is also a tutor. Will they call themselves a tutor? Will they call themselves like an advisor? They're advising, they're tutoring, they're teaching, and they're coaching. They just happen to be using the word coach.
Yeah.
And so we're all those things. And so again, when I use teach, again, I think through the power of this collective understanding, we could change even words that I think were seen as negative into a positive, because it just becomes so, this movement. When I use the word movement, I've studied movements in Africa. I lived in South Africa, apartheid movements. I studied civil rights movement. I studied movements in other parts of the world. It starts just like this. And then, narratives change to the point where people forget, what it used to mean, and take on new meaning. And this is, our goal is to do it in a positive way.
Yeah. And again, I love your slogan, Real Men Teach. I think it's awesome. I think it's perfect. Wouldn't want you to change that at all. But just thinking in terms of how do we get more men engaged? That was kind of the thought that came up for me. And
that's well taken. I think because again, when I use the word teach, I'm saying teach can mean anything. It can mean anything you want it to mean, and it's not the teacher in front of the blackboard with 20 kids in the classroom and chairs. Teaching happens again in the barber chair. It happens on the street corner. It's happening if you ask someone, tell me the greatest lesson you learned in life, and then ask them how many of them learned that sitting in a classroom with 25 other students and with a teacher. I would challenge you to find out, there'd be 10% who said, yeah, I learned that in school. I learned that my greatest lesson in life on the football field, on a basketball court, in church, in the barbershop, at the store, at the kitchen table, at Thanksgiving dinner, at my uncle's house. That's where teaching happens, because again, that's where your guard is down, and you're more open to listening, and you're open to taking risks. And so, hey man, try this, and you're looking around like there's nobody here to laugh at me. This person cares about me. I'll try it. When you're in classroom, hey, Mr. Valentine, can you read page 5, paragraph 2? You're just like, what? You may be a good reader. It may even be the reason why you don't want to. It's just like, there's a certain environment. And if in the end, if the students are the key, we're saying we're here for students. We wouldn't be teachers or coaches without players and students. Then let's make sure that environment, that we meet the students where they are, which is in an environment where they're more likely to retain and adopt and carry on a lot of what you're trying to coach or teach them.
Yeah. Well, time flies when you're having fun. So first of all, I just want to say thank you, brother, for being that role model, for being that teacher, man, with your program. I completely support what you're doing. I'm super proud of you and what you're doing, and want to support you in whatever way that I can. So now I want to give you an opportunity to let people know, how can they find you if they want to get involved and they want to, support the movement? How do they find you?
Please go to realmenteach.com. On that site, you'll see opportunities to buy apparel like this. Proceeds will go towards scholarships. We have different colors, so represent your fraternity, represent your college, represent your high school color, your favorite colors. We have that. We also have sort of highlighting, you mentioned films. We highlight positive images in Black culture, like Professor Dwayne Wayne from Different Worlds, like Furious Styles from Boys in the Hood. There have always been men in popular culture that I believe represented what Real Men Teach are. For many people, the first time they heard the word gentrification was in Boys in the Hood, because he's talking about communities, being swapped, snapped up. And so go online. If you say, Curtis, I don't want to buy apparel for myself, purchase it for somebody else, a young person, a husband, a friend, an educator, so they can stand with us. If you don't want to buy anything, you can still donate directly to an account, and that money will also go towards scholarships. You can nominate someone to be part of our Real Men Teach 100 as well. Follow us on Twitter, Real Men Teach, the number 2. Follow us on Instagram, official Real Men Teach. You can follow me on LinkedIn, Curtis Valentine, and you'll be able to also see the daily Real Men Teach 100. We are continuing, brother. We got so many brothers. It's going to probably end up being the Real Men Teach 365, because the more, if I keep getting brothers, I'm gonna keep posting them. I get high off of the feeling of knowing that these brothers are being appreciated, and some for the first time. The amount of messages I get, Mike, from people saying, "Hey, Kurt, man, I really appreciate that, bro. I kind of didn't understand what it was gonna feel like, but the love I'm getting back from people, all the congratulations, all the I'm proud of you." I got high school friends, my high school teacher, my aunties, my cousins saying, "Oh my gosh, what is this recognition you're getting from these Real Men Teach?" I'm seeing all over the place. And what they'll say is this, and I'll finish up with this. They'll say, "Curtis, I don't do it for the recognition, but it damn sure feels good to be recognized, to be appreciated. It feels good to be, we don't do it. I don't do it saying, look at me. But when I get appreciated, Curtis, you know what? This is going to fill my cup, because a lot of us are empty. We got to fill each other's cup."
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. So now I want to give you an opportunity for some closing thoughts. Just whatever's on your heart, man, just to share with the audience. Again, I highly encourage everyone watching this to log on to realmenteach.com. Support it in whatever way you feel comfortable, but it's something that we definitely need to support. I love the idea of brothers talking about education, about teaching. That's what my platform is about: teaching, coaching. So just any final thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I mean, I'll say this. I mean, from the time we came to this country, for those of us who were enslaved, you could do anything you want to your slave. You could beat your slave, maim your slave, sexually abuse your slave. There was one thing you couldn't do. You couldn't teach your slave, because they knew the power of education even then. They knew the power of education up until now, and knowing that everything they do to keep education from us is part of a grand scheme. We're saying, you know what? It's going to take an army to take back our communities. And what we're doing at Real Men Teach, we're building our army. It's a national campaign, brothers from every walk of life, and we're all in the same plane. It's not doctors versus barbers. It's not lawyers versus bus drivers. We stand together as men of color, saying, it begins with me. This is the world I want to create. I'm not waiting for someone else to do it for me. I'm standing here. I'm joining the Real Men Teach movement. I'm part of the army. I'm here because I understand the power of education and the power that folks are trying to take from us, because they knew the power of education. They know it. We know it too. Real Men Teach is part of that army.
Yeah, and it all falls back to knowledge is power. but only if it's applied.
Mm-hmm.
All right, my man. Well, we appreciate you, man. We wish you continued success in everything that you do. And I don't believe in accidents. Everything happens for a reason. And we've been brought together for a divine purpose. And I'm so glad that we've connected. And I'm sure this won't be the last collaboration. So thank you, man, for what you're doing.
Brother, just getting started.
Absolutely. All right. So this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotype. So remember, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And remember, real men teach. We'll see you next episode. Take care.
Thank you.